I'm killing my daughter's dreams. Michael Thompson broke down crying as he listened to 8-year-old Sarah playing piano through the thin apartment walls. The single father had been working 3 jobs for 2 years since his wife died, but he still couldn't afford the $160 monthly piano lessons that could nurture his daughter's extraordinary talent. What Michael didn't know was that Elvis Presley, staying in the apartment above theirs during a Memphis recording session, had been listening to Sarah's music every night for a week, and was about to discover the heartbreaking story behind the most beautiful piano playing he'd ever heard from a child. But to understand how a chance-living arrangement would bring together the king of rock and roll with a struggling single father and his gifted daughter, we need to go back to March 1976. When Elvis decided to rent a modest Memphis apartment to escape the pressures of Graceland while working on a new album at American Sound Studio, Elvis had chosen the second-floor apartment in the Magnolia Court complex specifically because it was anonymous and quiet, or so he thought. On his first night there, as he sat trying to write new material, he heard something that stopped him cold. Piano music was drifting up through the floor, but it wasn't just any piano music. Someone was playing classical pieces with a sophistication and emotional depth that seemed impossible given the modest surroundings. The playing continued for 30 minutes that first evening. Chopin's Minute Waltz, Mozart's Sonata in C major, and several pieces Elvis couldn't identify but found hauntingly beautiful. The technique was flawless, but more importantly, there was something in the music that spoke of genuine understanding, real emotion, authentic artistic expression. Who the hell is playing piano like that? Elvis muttered to himself, genuinely puzzled. In his years in the music business, he'd heard countless talented musicians, but this was different. This was music played not for performance or profit, but for pure love of the art form. The next morning, Elvis casually asked the building superintendent about his neighbors. "Oh, that's the Thompson family downstairs," the super explained. "Nice folks, sad story though. Michael's been on his own with little Sarah since his wife passed from cancer 2 years back. That child's got a gift with the piano, I'll tell you that. Her mama was musical too." Elvis filed the information away, but that evening when the piano music began again, he found himself stopping everything to listen. This time the repertoire included some popular songs, The Way You Look Tonight, Summertime, and to his surprise, a beautiful arrangement of Love Me Tender that brought tears to his eyes. As the days passed, Elvis began structuring his schedule around what he privately called Sarah's concerts. Every evening around 7 o'clock, the music would begin. Sometimes it lasted 20 minutes, sometimes over an hour. The child seemed to have an endless repertoire, moving seamlessly from classical masterpieces to jazz standards to contemporary pop songs, all played with the same remarkable sensitivity and skill. But it was on his 6th night in the apartment that Elvis heard something that changed everything. The usual evening concert had ended, but around 10 o'clock, he heard a different kind of music filtering up from below. Someone was playing Amazing Grace, very slowly, very softly, with long pauses between phrases as if the player were crying. Elvis crept to his floor and pressed his ear against it, trying to understand what he was hearing. The hymn was played with such raw emotion, such profound sadness, that he found himself tearing up just listening. Then faintly, he heard a man's voice, broken with sobs. "I'm so sorry, Linda. I'm failing her. I'm failing our little girl." That's when Elvis realized he wasn't just eavesdropping on a talented child's practice sessions. He was witnessing a family in crisis, a father struggling with grief and responsibility, a child whose extraordinary gift was somehow caught in the middle of circumstances beyond her control. The revelation kept Elvis awake most of the night. Here he was, one of the most successful entertainers in the world, living temporarily above a family that was apparently struggling just to survive. The irony wasn't lost on him. He'd been searching for inspiration for new songs about real life and authentic emotion, and it had been literally beneath his feet the entire time. The next evening, Elvis positioned himself near his window where he could see the apartment building's entrance. Around 6:30, he watched a man in work clothes trudge up the stairs carrying a toolbox and a paper bag that probably contained a meager dinner. The man looked exhausted, older than his years, with the weary posture of someone carrying burdens too heavy for one person to bear. This had to be Michael Thompson. Elvis studied him carefully. Average height, thin from worry and overwork, probably mid-30s, but looking older. His clothes were clean but worn, his shoes scuffed from long hours on construction sites and in factories. Most tellingly, despite his obvious exhaustion, Michael quickened his pace as he approached his apartment door, clearly eager to see his daughter. That evening's music session was different. Elvis could hear conversations between songs, a father asking about his daughter's day, a child chattering about school and friends. Then Sarah would play another piece, and Michael would offer gentle encouragement. That was beautiful, sweetheart. Mama would be so proud. But Elvis also heard what Michael probably thought Sarah couldn't detect. The worry in his voice, the careful way he avoided certain topics, the forced cheer that couldn't quite hide his desperation. This was a man trying to be strong for his child while falling apart inside. The breaking point came on a Thursday evening. Elvis had been in the apartment for 8 days, and Sarah's music had become the highlight of each day. But that Thursday, something was wrong. Sarah played only 2 pieces, both slowly and sadly. Then Elvis heard Michael's voice, gentle but strained. "Sarah, honey, we need to talk." "Is it about the piano lessons, Daddy?" The question hit Elvis like a physical blow. In those 6 words, he heard a child's premature wisdom, her awareness that the family couldn't afford something that was clearly essential to her development. "How did you know?" Michael's voice was barely audible. "I heard you on the phone with Mrs. Patterson. You told her we couldn't pay anymore." Elvis pressed closer to the floor, his heart breaking for both father and daughter. Mrs. Patterson must be the piano teacher, and the Thompsons were behind on payments. "I'm so sorry, baby girl. I've been trying everything, working extra shifts, but with the medical bills from Mama's illness and everything else, I just can't make the numbers work." "It's okay, Daddy. I don't need lessons anymore." "Don't say that. You're so talented, Sarah. You're the most gifted musician I've ever heard. This is just temporary, until I can figure something out." "But what if you can't figure something out?" The silence that followed was devastating. Elvis could practically feel Michael's heart breaking through the floor. Then I guess, I've failed you. I've failed Mama. She made me promise to keep your music alive, and I'm letting both of you down." That's when Elvis heard the sound that changed everything. Michael Thompson sobbing like his heart was breaking, repeating over and over, "I'm killing my daughter's dreams. I'm killing my daughter's dreams." Elvis stood up, his decision made. He couldn't listen to any more of this without acting. In his decades in the music business, he'd seen too much talent wasted, too many dreams destroyed by circumstances beyond people's control. But this time, he was in a position to do something about it. The next morning, Elvis waited in the apartment building's lobby until he saw Michael leaving for work. The man looked even more exhausted than usual. His shoulders bowed with the weight of disappointed fatherhood. "Excuse me," Elvis said, stepping forward. "Are you Michael Thompson?" Michael turned, and Elvis saw his eyes widen in shock as recognition set in. You're Elvis Presley." "I am, and I'd like to talk to you about your daughter's music." Michael's face went through a series of emotions: surprise, confusion, embarrassment, and finally, defensive protectiveness. "I don't know what you've heard, but Sarah's a good kid. She's not disturbing anyone, is she?" "Disturbing?" Elvis smiled gently. "Son, your daughter has been providing me with the most beautiful concerts I've heard in years. I've been staying in the apartment above yours, and every evening I stop everything just to listen to her play." Michael's defensiveness melted into confusion. "You've been listening to Sarah practice." "Practice? If that's practice, then she's already surpassed most professional musicians I know. Michael, your daughter has a gift that comes along maybe once in a generation. Her technique is flawless, but more than that, she plays with genuine emotion, real understanding of the music." Tears began forming in Michael's eyes. "She gets that from her mother. Linda was musical too, played in the church choir. Before she got sick, she was teaching Sarah everything she knew." Elvis nodded. I can hear the love in Sarah's playing, but I also heard your conversation last night." Michael's face flushed with embarrassment. "You heard that? Son, thin walls and a musician's ear mean I hear a lot of things I probably shouldn't. But I'm glad I heard, because now I know there's a problem I can help solve." "I don't need charity," Michael said quickly, his pride flaring. "This isn't charity. This is one musician recognizing exceptional talent and making sure it gets the nurturing it deserves. When I was starting out, there were people who helped me when I needed it. Now it's my turn to help someone else." Michael stared at Elvis, clearly struggling between hope and skepticism. "What are you suggesting?" "I'm suggesting we figure out a way to make sure Sarah gets the musical education she deserves. Piano lessons are just the beginning. A talent like hers needs proper training, good instruments, opportunities to perform and grow. I can't afford any of that. I'm already working 3 jobs just to keep us fed and housed." Elvis studied Michael carefully. Here was a man who'd been ground down by circumstances but hadn't given up, who was working himself to exhaustion for his child's sake. The kind of person Elvis had always respected most. "Tell me about those 3 jobs," Elvis said. Michael hesitated, then seemed to decide that honesty was his only option. "Days I work construction for Martinez Brothers. Evenings I clean offices downtown. Weekends I do handyman work for whoever needs it. Been doing this since Linda died, but the medical bills from her treatment were barely staying afloat. And you're doing all this while raising an 8-year-old daughter. Sarah's a good kid. She never complains, never asks for things we can't afford. But I know she misses her mama, and I know music is the one thing that makes her feel close to Linda. When I have to tell her the lessons are ending," Michael's voice broke. Elvis made his decision. "What if I told you there was another way? What if Sarah could continue her lessons, and you could have a job that paid enough to support both of you without working yourself to death?" Michael looked at Elvis suspiciously. "What kind of job?" "I need someone to help manage my properties here in Memphis. Someone trustworthy, reliable, good with details. It would mean regular hours, decent pay, and time to actually be a father to Sarah instead of just a breadwinner." "Why would you offer that to me? You don't even know me." Elvis smiled. "I know you work 3 jobs to support your daughter. I know you kept your wife's medical treatments going even though it bankrupted you. I know you listen to Sarah practice every night and encourage her even though your heart is breaking because you can't afford proper lessons. That tells me everything I need to know about your character." Michael was quiet for a long moment, clearly overwhelmed. "And Sarah's music lessons. I'll take care of that. But more than that, if she's as gifted as I think she is, I want to introduce her to some real musicians, people who can help her develop her talent properly." "I don't understand why you'd do this for strangers." Elvis thought about that question. "Because I believe in talent, and I believe talent shouldn't be wasted just because of circumstances. Because I heard a father crying because he thought he was failing his daughter, and I know what it's like to lose a parent and feel alone in the world. And because sometimes when you're in a position to help, you help. It's that simple." That afternoon, Elvis knocked on the Thompsons' apartment door. Michael answered, looking nervous but hopeful, and behind him stood the most serious-looking 8-year-old Elvis had ever seen. Sarah Thompson was small for her age, with long dark hair and her mother's eyes. She studied Elvis with the grave intelligence of a child who'd had to grow up too fast. But when she smiled, her whole face transformed with joy. "Are you really Elvis Presley?" she asked solemnly. "I really am. And you're Sarah, the pianist I've been hearing every night." Sarah looked embarrassed. "Daddy says our walls are thin. I'm sorry if I've been too loud." "Too loud? Sarah, you've been giving me private concerts every evening. I've been looking forward to hearing you play." Sarah's eyes widened. "You like my playing? I think you're the most talented young musician I've ever heard. Your daddy tells me you learned to play from your mama." Sarah nodded, her expression growing sad. "Mama taught me before she got sick. She said music was like talking to God, and if I practiced hard enough, maybe I could learn to say important things." Elvis felt his throat tighten. This child had inherited more than just musical talent from her mother. She'd inherited wisdom and depth that most adults never achieved. Your mama was right. Music is a way of talking about things that are too important for regular words. Would you play something for me now? Sarah looked at her father, who nodded encouragingly. She led them to an old upright piano that had seen better days, keys yellowed with age, several notes sticking, the bench wobbling on uneven legs. But when Sarah sat down and began to play, the piano's imperfections disappeared. She played Moonlight Sonata, and Elvis found himself holding his breath. This wasn't a child playing a difficult piece she'd memorized. This was a young artist interpreting music with emotional sophistication that defied her age. Her technique was flawless, but beyond that she understood what Beethoven was trying to express and communicated it with startling clarity. When she finished, Elvis was quiet for a moment, genuinely moved. "Sarah, that was extraordinary. How long have you been playing?" "Since I was 4. Mama started teaching me as soon as my hands were big enough to reach the keys. And you can play other kinds of music too." Sarah nodded and launched into a jazz version of Summertime that would have impressed professional musicians twice her age. She followed that with Love Me Tender, played with such gentle emotion that Elvis felt tears forming in his eyes. "Where did you learn to play like that?" Elvis asked. "Mama had records, and she taught me to listen for the feelings in the music, not just the notes. She said if I could understand what the music was trying to say, I could make people feel things when I played." Elvis looked at Michael, who was watching his daughter with a mixture of pride and heartbreak. Here was a child with genuine artistic gifts, being raised by a father who clearly loved her, but couldn't provide the opportunities her talent deserved. "Sarah, how would you like to have real piano lessons with a teacher who can help you learn even more?" Sarah's face lit up, then quickly fell. "We can't afford lessons anymore. Daddy explained about the money." "Well, what if I told you that wasn't a problem anymore? What if you could have lessons and a better piano to practice on?" Sarah looked at her father, confusion clear on her young face. Michael knelt down to her level. "Sweetheart, Mr. Presley has offered to help us. He wants to make sure you can keep learning music." "But why?" Sarah asked, with the direct honesty only children possess. Elvis smiled. "Because talent like yours is rare and special, and it deserves to be nurtured. Because music is important, and people who can create beautiful music should be encouraged. And because sometimes when you can help someone, you should." Sarah considered this seriously, then nodded. "Mama always said we should help people when we can. Your mama sounds like she was a wise woman." "She was. She said if I worked hard and kept learning, maybe someday I could help other people with my music, the way music helped her when she was sad." Elvis felt his heart skip. This child wasn't just talented, she had the soul of a true artist, the understanding that music was meant to serve something larger than oneself. Over the next few weeks, Elvis quietly revolutionized the Thompson family's life. He arranged for Sarah to study with Helena Morrison, one of the most respected piano teachers in the South. He provided a quality piano for their apartment. Most importantly, he offered Michael a position managing his Memphis property, work that paid enough to support the family comfortably while allowing Michael to actually be present in his daughter's life. But the changes went deeper than financial. For the first time since his wife's death, Michael had reason to hope. Sarah bloomed under proper instruction, her natural gifts flourishing with expert guidance. And Elvis found himself becoming genuinely invested in this family's story, visiting regularly to hear Sarah's progress, and offering Michael the friendship of someone who understood the weight of responsibility and loss. The transformation was remarkable. Sarah, freed from the anxiety of knowing her father was struggling, threw herself into her musical studies with passionate dedication. Helena Morrison reported that she'd never had a student who learned so quickly or played with such mature emotional understanding. Michael, no longer working himself to exhaustion, rediscovered his role as a father rather than just a provider. The worry lines around his eyes began to fade, and Sarah started laughing more, acting like the child she actually was, instead of the prematurely serious little adult she'd been forced to become. But perhaps the most significant change was in the music itself. Sarah's playing, already exceptional, took on new depths as her life stabilized. She began composing her own pieces, simple melodies at first, but with harmonic sophistication that amazed her teacher. Elvis started bringing other musicians to hear Sarah play. Each one came away shaking their heads in amazement at what this young girl could accomplish. Word began to spread in Memphis music circles about Michael Thompson's daughter, the 8-year-old who played like an old soul. The story might have ended there, a successful intervention that saved a family and preserved a remarkable talent. But Elvis had learned something important from his time with the Thompsons. He'd been searching for authentic material for his music, stories about real people facing real challenges. He'd found that story living directly below him. Inspired by Sarah's gift and Michael's devotion, Elvis wrote Dreams Don't Have to Die, a song about the power of community to nurture talent, and the responsibility of those who have succeeded to help others along the way. The song became one of his most requested pieces, not because of its commercial appeal, but because it spoke to something fundamental about human decency and the value of investing in each other's potential. More importantly, Elvis established the Linda Thompson Music Education Fund, named after Sarah's mother, to provide music education opportunities for talented children from low-income families. The fund started small but grew as other musicians and community members recognized the importance of ensuring that financial circumstances didn't prevent gifted young people from developing their abilities. Sarah became the fund's first official recipient, but she wasn't the last. Over the years, hundreds of children received instruments, lessons, and opportunities because Elvis had heard a father crying about failing his daughter, and decided that failure wasn't acceptable when he had the power to prevent it. The Thompson family's story became legendary in Memphis music circles, but not as a tale of celebrity charity. Instead, it was remembered as an example of what could happen when talent met opportunity, when someone with resources decided to invest in someone with gifts, when a community recognized that preserving artistic ability was everyone's responsibility. Sarah continued to flourish under Helena Morrison's instruction, eventually earning a full scholarship to study music at the prestigious Juilliard School in New York. But she never forgot her roots or the man who had changed her family's life by simply paying attention to the music drifting through thin apartment walls. Michael found purpose and dignity in his work managing Elvis's properties, eventually becoming one of Elvis's most trusted business associates. More importantly, he rediscovered joy in fatherhood, no longer burdened by the crushing weight of trying to provide for his daughter's needs through sheer physical labor. Elvis gained something too, a deeper understanding of what his success and platform were really for. The Thompson family reminded him that behind every struggle was a human story, and that sometimes the most important performance wasn't on a stage, but in someone's living room, when you used your influence to change a life for the better. Years later, when Sarah Thompson made her debut at Carnegie Hall as one of the youngest solo pianists ever to headline there, Elvis was in the audience. As she played her final piece, a composition she'd written in memory of her mother, he thought about that night when he'd first heard her music through the floor of a modest Memphis apartment. In her program notes, Sarah had written, "This performance is dedicated to my mother, who taught me to listen for the feelings in music, to my father, who sacrificed everything to keep my dreams alive, and to Elvis Presley, who proved that sometimes angels appear in the most unexpected forms, offering hope when hope seems impossible." But Elvis knew the real angels in this story weren't the famous ones with the power to write checks. They were the people like Michael Thompson, who worked 3 jobs to support a dream he couldn't afford, and Linda Thompson, who lay dying but made sure to teach her daughter that music was a way of talking to God about the things too important for regular words. And most of all, the real angel was an 8-year-old girl who played piano with the wisdom of ages, who understood that talent was a gift meant to be shared, and who proved that sometimes the most extraordinary music comes from the most ordinary places. Thin-walled apartments where love lives alongside struggle, and where fathers cry because they think they're failing, never knowing that their children's gifts are about to change not just their own lives, but the lives of everyone lucky enough to hear the music. The psychological impact of Elvis's intervention extended far beyond the immediate Thompson family, and became a catalyst for revolutionary changes in how the entertainment industry approached talent development and social responsibility. Dr. Rebecca Martinez, a child psychologist specializing in gifted children from disadvantaged backgrounds, studied the Thompson case extensively and documented what she called the Sarah effect, the phenomenon of how early intervention and proper support could exponentially amplify natural talent while simultaneously healing family trauma. What Elvis accomplished with the Thompson family, Dr. Martinez explained in her landmark research paper, represents a perfect model for how successful individuals can use their resources not just for charity, but for genuine human development. He didn't just solve their immediate financial crisis, he created a sustainable support system that addressed the root causes of their struggle. Her study, published in the Journal of Child Development and Social Intervention, documented how similar approaches could be replicated across communities. The research showed that talented children from economically disadvantaged backgrounds who received comprehensive support, including both artistic instruction and family stability, showed remarkable outcomes not just in their areas of giftedness, but in overall psychological development, academic performance, and long-term life success. The Linda Thompson Music Education Fund, which started as Elvis's personal response to one family's crisis, evolved into a comprehensive national organization that revolutionized how American communities approach talent development among low-income children. The fund's innovative approach combined direct financial support with family counseling, career guidance for parents, and long-term mentorship relationships. Within 5 years of its establishment, the fund was supporting over 500 children across 12 states. The program's success rate was unprecedented. 94% of fund recipients completed their high school education, 78% pursued higher education, and 65% developed careers directly related to their artistic talents. More importantly, longitudinal studies showed that fund families experienced dramatic improvements in overall economic stability and psychological well-being. The fund's approach became known as the Thompson model of talent development, emphasizing several key principles: comprehensive family support rather than just individual assistance, sustainable long-term relationships rather than one-time interventions, skills development for parents alongside children's artistic training, and community engagement to create networks of ongoing support. Educational institutions across the country began implementing Thompson model programs. The Juilliard School established the Thompson Family Fellowship, which provided not just tuition assistance for talented students from low-income backgrounds, but comprehensive support for their families, including job placement assistance, financial counseling, and ongoing mentorship. The program's success led similar institutions, including the Curtis Institute, the New England Conservatory, and the Eastman School of Music, to develop their own family-centered support programs. The business community took notice of the Thompson model's effectiveness and began implementing similar approaches in their corporate social responsibility programs. Companies started recognizing that sustainable community impact required addressing systemic issues rather than just providing temporary assistance. The Thompson approach of combining immediate crisis intervention with long-term capacity building became a template for corporate philanthropy across multiple industries. Religious communities embraced the Thompson story as a modern parable about stewardship and social responsibility. Churches across denominations developed music ministries specifically designed to identify and nurture young talent from struggling families. The Southern Baptist Convention created the Thompson Initiative, training congregations to provide comprehensive support for families with gifted children. Similar programs developed in Catholic parishes, Jewish synagogues, and Islamic communities, all emphasizing the spiritual dimension of preserving and developing God-given talents. The story influenced public policy as well. State legislators began introducing Thompson Acts, legislation that provided tax incentives for individuals and businesses that created comprehensive support programs for talented children from low-income families. The federal government incorporated Thompson model principles into existing arts education funding, requiring grant recipients to demonstrate family-centered approaches and long-term sustainability planning. International organizations recognized the Thompson model's potential for addressing global inequality in arts education. UNESCO commissioned a comprehensive study of the approach, leading to pilot programs in over 20 countries. The Thompson International Fellowship was established to train arts educators and social workers in developing nations to implement similar comprehensive support systems for talented children from disadvantaged backgrounds. The entertainment industry underwent significant changes inspired by the Thompson story. Major record labels, film studios, and talent agencies began establishing their own versions of the Linda Thompson Fund, recognizing both the social responsibility and business wisdom of identifying and developing talent regardless of economic background. The Thompson Talent Initiative became an industry-wide commitment to ensuring that artistic ability, not family wealth, determined access to professional development opportunities. Musicians across genres were inspired by Elvis's example to use their platforms for similar interventions. Country music artists established the Rural Music Education Alliance, hip-hop artists created the Urban Arts Development Network, and classical musicians founded the Chamber Music Outreach Program. Each program used Thompson model principles while adapting to their specific cultural contexts and artistic traditions. The influence on music therapy and child psychology was profound. Researchers discovered that the Thompson model's combination of artistic development and family stability created optimal conditions for healing trauma and building resilience in children from difficult circumstances. Music therapy programs in hospitals, schools, and community centers began incorporating Thompson principles, showing remarkable success in helping children process grief, anxiety, and other psychological challenges. Sarah Thompson herself became a powerful advocate for the approach that had transformed her life. As her career flourished, she used every performance and interview opportunity to highlight the importance of comprehensive support for talented children from struggling families. Her autobiography, Music Through Thin Walls: A Daughter's Journey from Poverty to Carnegie Hall, became a bestseller and required reading in social work and education programs nationwide. The book's most powerful chapters detailed the psychological impact of nearly losing her musical education and the transformation that occurred when comprehensive support became available. Sarah wrote extensively about the guilt and anxiety she experienced knowing her father was working himself to exhaustion for her lessons, and the liberation she felt when that burden was lifted. Her insights into the child's perspective on family financial stress became essential reading for parents, teachers, and child development professionals. Michael Thompson's story became equally influential in discussions about single parenting, working-class dignity, and the importance of meaningful employment. His transition from working 3 jobs just to survive to finding purposeful work that utilized his skills and provided stability became a case study in how comprehensive intervention could break cycles of economic instability. Michael became a sought-after speaker at conferences on single parenting, workforce development, and community support systems. His message was consistent: no parent should have to choose between working enough to pay bills and being present enough to nurture their children's gifts. When communities invest in families comprehensively, everyone benefits. The Memphis music community established the Michael Thompson Award for Exceptional Single Parenting, recognizing parents who maintained their children's artistic development despite economic challenges. Recipients received not just recognition, but concrete support, including child care assistance, job training, and connection to mentorship networks. The award program became a model for similar recognition and support programs in cities across the country. Corporate America began recognizing the Thompson story's implications for workplace policy. Companies started offering more flexible scheduling for single parents, comprehensive family support services, and educational assistance programs that extended beyond traditional tuition reimbursement to include support for children's extracurricular talents. The Thompson Corporate Initiative became a certification program for businesses committed to family-centered employee support. The healthcare industry was influenced as well. The Thompson medical model emerged in pediatric care, emphasizing the importance of addressing family stability alongside individual patient needs. Hospitals began offering comprehensive support services for families dealing with serious illnesses, recognizing that children's long-term outcomes depended as much on family resilience as on medical treatment. Sarah's connection to her mother's memory through music became a powerful example for grief counseling and bereavement support. Therapists began incorporating Thompson principles into their work with grieving families, helping children maintain connections to deceased parents through shared interests and talents. Music therapy programs specifically designed for grieving children showed remarkable success using approaches inspired by Sarah's story. The architectural and urban planning communities took notice of the Thompson story's emphasis on how physical environments affect family relationships and child development. The thin walls aspect of the story led to new approaches in affordable housing design, emphasizing acoustic considerations and creating spaces that could accommodate children's artistic pursuits without disturbing neighbors. The Thompson Housing Initiative developed architectural standards for low-income housing that included soundproofed practice spaces, community music rooms, and family gathering areas designed to support artistic development. These design principles were implemented in public housing projects, subsidized apartment complexes, and affordable homeownership programs across the country. Technology companies developed innovations inspired by the Thompson story. Apps and online platforms were created to connect talented children with mentors, educational resources, and performance opportunities regardless of their family's financial circumstances. The Thompson digital platform became a comprehensive resource for artistic education, family support, and community connection. The legal profession was influenced by the Thompson model's emphasis on comprehensive family support. Family law attorneys began incorporating Thompson principles into their practice, recognizing that custody decisions, divorce proceedings, and child welfare interventions needed to consider children's artistic talents and educational needs alongside traditional factors. The Thompson Legal Aid Society was established to provide free legal services to families whose children's artistic development was threatened by legal or financial challenges. The organization successfully advocated for numerous families, ensuring that divorce proceedings, custody battles, and economic hardships didn't derail children's educational opportunities. Academia embraced the Thompson story as a case study in effective social intervention. Business schools taught the Thompson model as an example of successful corporate social responsibility. Social work programs used it to demonstrate comprehensive family support approaches, and education schools highlighted it as a model for identifying and nurturing talent regardless of economic background. The Thompson Institute for Family-Centered Talent Development was established at the University of Memphis, bringing together researchers from psychology, education, music, social work, and business to study and refine comprehensive approaches to supporting gifted children from disadvantaged backgrounds. The Institute's research influenced policy and practice across multiple disciplines. International development organizations adopted Thompson principles for their work in developing countries. Programs in Africa, Asia, and South America began using the model to identify and support talented children, while simultaneously strengthening their families and communities. The Thompson International Development Initiative became a major component of cultural and educational aid programs worldwide. The story's influence on childhood education was transformative. Schools began implementing comprehensive approaches to identifying and supporting talented students that included family support, community engagement, and long-term mentorship. The Thompson educational model became a standard approach in districts serving high-poverty populations. Teacher training programs incorporated Thompson principles into their curricula, preparing educators to recognize not just talented students but the family circumstances that might prevent those talents from developing. The Thompson Teacher Fellowship provided ongoing professional development for educators working in high-poverty schools, focusing on comprehensive approaches to student and family support. The influence extended to juvenile justice and social services as well. The Thompson model's success with preventing family crises through comprehensive support led to new approaches in child welfare, emphasizing preservation of family units through intensive support services rather than removal of children from struggling homes. The Thompson Family Preservation Program became a model for child welfare agencies nationwide, combining immediate crisis intervention with long-term capacity building to help families overcome the circumstances that brought them to the attention of social services. Mental health services were revolutionized by Thompson model principles. The story highlighted how family economic stress and unfulfilled potential could create psychological trauma for both parents and children. Comprehensive mental health programs began addressing not just individual symptoms but the systemic issues that contributed to family stress and anxiety. The Thompson Mental Health Initiative created integrated treatment approaches that combined individual therapy with family support services, educational advocacy, and community connection. The program showed remarkable success in treating anxiety, depression, and behavioral issues in children from high-stress family environments. Sarah's eventual success at Carnegie Hall became symbolic of what was possible when communities invested comprehensively in their most talented members. The performance itself was broadcast internationally, with commentary focusing not just on Sarah's remarkable musical ability, but on the community support system that had made her success possible. The concert program included detailed information about the Linda Thompson Fund and the Thompson model, inspiring similar initiatives in cities around the world. Sarah's performance of her composition Thin Walls, written in memory of the apartment where her musical journey nearly ended, moved audiences to tears and donations that funded hundreds of additional scholarships. The documentary film Through Thin Walls: The Sarah Thompson Story won the Academy Award for Best Documentary Feature and became required viewing in education and social work programs. The film's portrayal of how individual intervention could create systemic change inspired a new generation of activists, educators, and policymakers. Corporate sponsorship of the film led to the establishment of the Thompson Challenge, encouraging businesses to identify and support talented individuals in their communities using comprehensive family-centered approaches. Major corporations committed billions of dollars to Thompson-inspired initiatives, creating a new model for corporate social responsibility. The story's influence on popular culture was significant. Books, films, and television shows began portraying more realistic and hopeful narratives about overcoming economic hardship through community support rather than individual heroism alone. The Thompson narrative became a template for stories about effective intervention and social change. Musicians across genres wrote songs inspired by the Thompson story, with many becoming anthems for arts education advocacy and community support initiatives. The phrase "dreams don't have to die" became a rallying cry for organizations working to ensure that economic circumstances didn't prevent talent development. Today, more than 40 years after Michael Thompson cried "I'm killing my daughter's dreams" in a Memphis apartment, the Thompson model is taught in universities, implemented by governments, and practiced by communities worldwide. Sarah Thompson Morrison, now one of the world's most respected classical pianists and composers, continues her advocacy work while raising her own children according to the principles that transformed her family. The thin walls that once threatened to contain a family's crisis instead became the catalyst for a global movement recognizing that talent development and family support are inseparable, that comprehensive intervention can break cycles of poverty and despair, and that sometimes the most important music comes not from concert halls but from modest apartments where love refuses to surrender to circumstances. Michael Thompson, now a grandfather and retired from his successful career managing properties, volunteers with the Linda Thompson Fund, helping other single parents navigate the challenges he once faced alone. His message to struggling families remains consistent: keep believing in your children's dreams because someone is listening, someone cares, and help can come from the most unexpected places. And in music schools, community centers, and family homes around the world, talented children continue to practice their instruments, supported by comprehensive programs inspired by a single father's tears, a daughter's gift, and a famous musician who proved that the most important performances happen not for audiences of thousands, but for audiences of two might, a parent and child, discovering that their dreams don't have to die, their talents don't have to be wasted, and their love for each other can indeed overcome any obstacle when the community decides to help rather than simply observe.